Lena Carter never expected her life to become a storm of lies. She had married Evan Marshall because he felt gentle and steady, someone who made her feel safe after years of working long shifts as a nurse in Ohio. His quiet nature balanced her tired days, and for a while it truly felt like they were building something solid. But Evan came with a family that never wanted Lena in their world. Patricia, his mother, always watched her with a cold smile. Charles acted polite but distant, and Renee made small comments that sounded harmless but always carried a sting. Lena tried to ignore them because Evan loved his family, and she didn't want to create conflict. She thought they would warm up eventually. Things changed slowly when Lena became the main earner. Her schedule was heavy, but she was proud of her work. Instead of respecting it, the Marshalls treated her success as if it was an insult. They whispered that she was too busy, that she acted too smart, and that Evan was losing control of his own home. They said it softly, but they said it often, and Evan grew quieter each time after visiting them. Lena felt the shift but brushed it away, believing that marriage meant trusting your partner no matter what. The more she succeeded, the more the Marshalls pushed her out. They would show up at the house without warning, pretend to help, then twist her words into something sharp. Patricia would sigh and say Lena wasn't the warm type. Renee would repeat things Lena said but make them sound harsh. Lena didn't fight back, thinking kindness would soften them, but that kindness only made them bolder. Evan noticed the tension but didn't know how to stop it. He loved his wife but had spent a lifetime being controlled by his parents. He tried to keep peace by staying neutral, not realizing that silence was making things worse. Lena still trusted him, and even when she felt uncomfortable around his family, she never imagined they would go beyond simple dislike. She thought they were just overprotective, not dangerous. But each visit left a heavier feeling in the house. Lena felt watched, judged, and picked apart. The small comments grew sharper. The smiles grew faker. The warmth in the home she shared with Evan began to fade. She found herself working longer hours because the hospital felt easier than dealing with the coldness waiting at her own dinner table. Still, Lena tried. She cooked meals for family gatherings, offered help when Patricia claimed she was struggling, and invited Renee to spend time together. Every effort was quietly discarded. Everything she gave was twisted into something she didn't mean. All she wanted was a peaceful marriage, but she had no idea that the Marshalls were already building something dark behind her back. Something that would hit her so hard she would question everything she believed about loyalty, trust, and love. She could feel a storm gathering around her, but she didn't yet know it had already begun. Patricia and Renee had always kept a close eye on Evan, and they didn't like how much he smiled around Lena. To them, Lena was a threat, not because she was unkind, but because she never needed anything from them. She worked long hours, handled her own bills, and made decisions without asking for approval. They were used to being the center of Evan's world, and watching him build a life with someone who didn't bend to their influence made them angry in ways they never admitted out loud. They kept their feelings hidden behind polite faces, but inside, they were looking for reasons to tear Lena down. When Evan talked about how hard Lena worked or how proud he was of her, they didn't congratulate him. Instead, they exchanged looks that said everything. Patricia would later pull him aside and tell him she worried Lena was too focused on herself. Renee would sit next to him and ask why Lena didn't slow down and take care of her husband. They made their comments sound like concern, not judgment, but they were carefully chosen to plant small doubts. At first, Evan brushed them off. He loved Lena and knew she worked long hours for both of them. But over time, the steady drip of remarks started sticking. Patricia made it seem like she had noticed things Evan had missed. Renee acted like she was protecting him from something he couldn't see. They said Lena was changing, that she came home too tired, that she didn't make time for family, all while smiling gently as if they were only trying to help. Lena sensed something off whenever they visited. She could feel their eyes following her, studying her every move. If she talked about work, they said she was bragging. If she stayed quiet, they whispered she was hiding something. Nothing she did felt right in their eyes, and she could feel a distance growing between her and Evan on days he spent time with them. He didn't accuse her of anything, but he seemed unsure, as if their words echoed in his mind longer than they should. The Marshalls didn't push too hard at first. They started slowly, knowing that doubt grows best when it feels natural. They pointed out how Lena didn't ask for advice, how she didn't check with Patricia about house matters, how she didn't call Renee for small things. They made these moments sound like signs of disrespect instead of independence. And they didn't stop there. They suggested Lena had secrets, that she was becoming distant, that being busy all the time wasn't a good sign for any marriage. Evan didn't argue with them, but he didn't defend Lena as strongly as before either. They noticed. They saw the small hesitation in his voice and took it as permission to keep going. Patricia started asking Evan if he was truly happy. Renee asked if he ever wondered why Lena was always tired. The questions seemed innocent, but the intention behind them was dark. Lena didn't hear these conversations. She only felt the quiet shift in her home, the heaviness that wasn't there before. She didn't know that the Marshalls were slowly shaping a story in Evan's mind. A story where she was no longer the loyal, hard-working partner he had married, but someone he should watch closely. She didn't know they were preparing the ground for something far more dangerous. The jealousy that started as bitterness was turning into a plan, and Lena had no idea it was already beginning to unfold. Patricia began testing how far she could push things. She started coming over without calling, usually at moments when Lena was getting ready for work or winding down after a long shift. She acted as if she was just checking on them, but she always managed to step into conversations that weren't meant for her. If Lena mentioned being tired or stressed, Patricia later repeated those same words to Evan but added her own twist, making it sound like Lena was unhappy with him or the marriage. She did it smoothly, always pretending she had misunderstood something, even though she knew exactly what she was doing. Renee played her part quietly. She spent more time around Lena, pretending she wanted to get closer. On the surface, she was helpful and friendly, but she carried her phone everywhere. Whenever Lena vented about a rough day, complained about a long shift, or expressed worry about finances, Renee would record her. She didn't catch anything dramatic because Lena wasn't the type to explode, but she didn't need drama. She took the smallest comments, things any tired person would say, and later played them to Evan as if they were signs of deeper problems. She made sure to cut out the parts where Lena also said positive things. Evan, listening to short, edited pieces, couldn't understand why Lena sounded irritated. He didn't realize the full context was missing. Renee made it seem harmless, saying she recorded it because she thought he should know Lena was struggling. Patricia added that she was worried Lena might pull away. They both acted like they were trying to protect him, not sabotage him. As their interference grew, Lena noticed something was off. They showed up at the house more often. They asked strange questions about her schedule. They commented on how much she worked and how late she came home. Patricia even went through drawers when she thought Lena wasn't watching, brushing it off as looking for a pen. Renee began inviting herself into private conversations between Lena and Evan, pretending she was simply curious. Everything felt slightly wrong, but nothing was obvious enough for Lena to accuse anyone directly. Still, she trusted Evan. She believed he would tell her if something was truly wrong. She didn't think his family would ever go beyond these small, irritating behaviors. She definitely didn't think they were building a plan around her. But the Marshalls were growing impatient. Their small tricks weren't breaking the marriage. Evan hesitated. He listened, but he didn't fully turn against Lena. They needed something stronger, something he couldn't ignore or explain away. They began discussing ways to prove Lena wasn't loyal. Not because they believed she was unfaithful, but because they needed a reason that would push Evan away from her once and for all. They knew if they could create proof, Evan would have no choice but to believe them. They wanted him to feel betrayed, hurt, and angry. They wanted him to doubt everything he shared with Lena. And they wanted to be the ones he ran to when everything fell apart. While Lena continued working hard and trying to hold her home together, a more dangerous plan was forming behind her back. One she never imagined anyone would dare to create. Charles decided it was time to move from small tricks to something that would actually damage Lena. He knew a man named Tyler Brooks from work, someone who never cared much about rules and often got involved in things he shouldn't. Tyler liked easy money, and Charles knew he would agree to anything if the price was right. So he approached him quietly and offered cash to help create a scene that would make Lena look unfaithful. The chance came during a local charity event where Lena was volunteering. She attended every year because her hospital supported the event, and she liked helping out. She had no idea Charles, Patricia, and Renee planned to show up as well. Tyler arrived with clear instructions. Get close to Lena, touch her arm, lean in when she spoke, and make it look like something more than a polite conversation. Lena didn't know him well, but she recognized him as someone from Charles's workplace. So when he walked up to her and started chatting, she didn't think anything of it. Tyler kept stepping closer, pretending he couldn't hear her. He laughed loudly and made unnecessary gestures, reaching for her arm or shoulder as if they were old friends. Lena felt a little uncomfortable but tried to stay polite because they were in a public place and she didn't want to cause a scene. She smiled out of courtesy, not interest. What she didn't see was Patricia standing at a distance, snapping pictures from the perfect angles. Renee held her phone too, capturing moments where Lena looked like she was enjoying the conversation. Charles took a few photos himself, making sure to get shots where Tyler's hand was on her arm. The pictures weren't dramatic on their own, but the Marshalls didn't need them to be. They only needed something that could be edited. After the event, they went home and began adjusting the images. They zoomed in, blurred backgrounds, and brightened small details to make everything look intentional. A simple, polite smile suddenly looked flirtatious. A quick touch on the arm looked like intimacy. They knew Evan wouldn't question the setting once emotions got involved. But they didn't stop with photos. Renee worked with a spoofing app to create fake text messages. They used a number that looked similar to Lena's and made it appear she was texting Tyler late at night. The messages were short but convincing enough. Things like, "Tonight was fun," or "Let's talk later." They even added fake replies to make it seem like Lena and Tyler had been talking secretly for weeks. It didn't matter that Lena had never sent a single message. The Marshalls only cared about how it would look. While all this was happening, Lena continued her routine without a clue. She went to work, cooked dinner, and talked to Evan about normal things. She didn't know that her actions were being watched and twisted into something ugly. She didn't know her polite laugh at a charity event was being turned into a weapon. She didn't know that false messages were being prepared in her name. To her, it was just another busy week. But to the Marshalls, everything was ready. They believed they finally had the kind of proof that could shatter Lena's marriage. They were sure Evan would never question their story once he saw the pictures and messages. And with that confidence, they prepared to deliver their final blow. The Marshalls waited for the right moment, and they chose a quiet Sunday dinner at Patricia's house. Evan thought it would be a simple meal, nothing more. He had no idea his family had spent days preparing for this exact moment. The atmosphere felt a little tense, but he assumed it was just another one of his mother's moods. Then, halfway through the meal, Patricia cleared her throat and said she had something difficult to share. She reached for a folder she had kept beside her chair and placed it on the table as if it weighed 100 pounds. Evan looked confused, but before he could ask anything, Patricia opened it and slid a stack of photos toward him. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then he recognized Lena. He recognized Tyler. He recognized the charity event. The photos showed angles that made it look like Lena was laughing too closely, letting Tyler touch her, leaning in as if sharing something private. His stomach dropped. Before he could fully process the pictures, Renee pulled out her phone and showed him the fake messages. She said she didn't want to hurt him, but thought he deserved to know. Charles sat quietly, shaking his head like a disappointed father. They all acted as if they were breaking painful news, not delivering lies they had created themselves. Evan felt something inside him collapse. Everything he had been told over the past weeks suddenly made sense in the worst way. The doubt his family had planted now bloomed into panic. He couldn't think clearly. He didn't ask questions. He didn't consider whether the evidence looked strange or out of place. He only felt betrayal. His family watched him closely, waiting for the moment he would break, and when he did, they stayed silent, letting him drown in it. He didn't finish dinner. He didn't even say goodbye. He stood up and walked out of the house in a haze, driving home with his hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time he reached the house, he was already convinced that Lena had been lying to him for months. He didn't pause to breathe. He didn't prepare himself. He went straight inside and confronted her with anger she had never seen in him before. Lena was shocked. She tried to speak calmly, but Evan interrupted her again and again, asking how long she had been cheating and why she pretended to care about their marriage. She didn't even understand what he was talking about until he shoved the printed photos into her hands. Her heart pounded as she looked at the images, recognizing the charity event, but unable to believe someone had twisted something so innocent. When he showed her the messages, she realized the situation was far worse than she thought. Someone had set her up. She tried to explain, but Evan was too hurt to listen. He kept seeing the pictures in his mind, kept hearing his mother's voice saying Lena was pulling away. That night, he packed a bag and left without giving her a chance to breathe. Lena sat alone after he slammed the door, holding the photos in her shaking hands, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. She knew she was being framed. What she didn't know yet was why anyone would go this far to destroy her marriage. She only knew she had lost Evan before she even had a chance to defend herself. Lena spent the next few days moving slowly through the house, trying to decide what to take and what to leave behind. Each room felt heavier than the last, filled with memories that now hurt more than they comforted. Evan stayed with his parents, and he didn't call or answer her messages. She wasn't even trying to fight with him anymore. She just wanted to understand what had happened to her life. One afternoon, she stepped into his home office to gather her paperwork. She didn't spend much time in that room, but she knew she had a few documents stored in the desk. When she opened the bottom drawer, she found something strange. There was an envelope shoved behind a stack of folders, as if someone wanted it hidden but didn't know where else to put it. At first, she almost ignored it, thinking it had nothing to do with her. But the envelope had Evan's name written on the front, and something about the handwriting made her pause. She opened it carefully and found a pile of financial statements, loan agreements, and letters from banks. She sat down and began reading them one by one. Her confusion slowly turned into shock. The documents showed debts taken out under Evan's name, credit lines, personal loans, even a large balance tied to a business account he had never mentioned. But as she kept looking, she saw signatures that didn't look like Evan's. She saw dates that didn't make sense. She saw patterns that pointed to someone else using his identity. The more she studied the papers, the clearer it became that Charles and Patricia had been using Evan's credit for years. They had borrowed money, shifted balances, and covered their tracks by routing everything through an old mailing address tied to their home. Evan had no idea, and Lena suddenly understood why the Marshalls wanted her gone so badly. If Evan stayed married, Lena, being careful and financially smart, would eventually notice the strange activity. It was only a matter of time before she questioned it. But if Evan divorced her, everything tied to his name became his responsibility alone. He would carry the blame for debts he never created, and his parents would walk away clean. Lena sat there for a long moment, staring at the papers. Her heart felt heavy, but not in the same way it had when Evan accused her. This was different. This was a sharp, cold realization. The Marshalls never cared about protecting Evan. They cared about protecting themselves. The cheating story wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was a shield to hide something far bigger. She thought about Evan, broken and confused, believing lies because he trusted the people who had raised him. She could still feel the sting of his accusations, but now she saw the truth beneath the anger. He wasn't trying to destroy her. He was being used. He was the one being set up, even more than she was. Lena's heartbreak didn't disappear, but it shifted into something steadier. She wiped her tears and placed the papers back on the desk. She wasn't going to run or let the Marshalls trap Evan into financial ruin. She wouldn't let them drag her name through the dirt while hiding crimes behind his back. For the first time since everything fell apart, she felt a spark of strength. She knew what she needed to do next. If the Marshalls wanted to play with lies, she would stand with the truth. She wasn't going to let them destroy 2 lives just to protect their own mistakes. Lena knew she couldn't fight this battle with anger or panic. She was already wounded from Evan's sudden distrust, but she understood now that reacting emotionally would only give the Marshalls exactly what they wanted. So she chose silence, patience, and careful steps. Instead of arguing or exposing what she knew too early, she reached out to someone who could help her do this the right way. That's how she found attorney Grace Whitford, a woman with a reputation for uncovering hidden fraud and handling cases where families tried to deceive the law. Grace listened quietly as Lena explained everything she had discovered. How the evidence against her suddenly appeared, how the photos didn't match the moments she remembered, how the texts looked unnatural, and how the financial documents pointed directly to Charles and Patricia's secret debt. Grace didn't rush her. She took notes, asked clear questions, and began forming a plan that relied on facts instead of emotion. Lena felt relief for the first time, not because the problem was solved, but because she finally had someone on her side who understood the depth of the manipulation. Grace advised Lena to stay silent. If the Marshalls believed she was confused, broken, and powerless, they wouldn't hide their mistakes. They might even make new ones. So Lena acted exactly how they expected: quiet, hurt, and trying to make sense of her collapsing marriage. She didn't defend herself when Patricia sent fake sympathy messages. She didn't respond when Charles tried to provoke her. She didn't try to reach Evan again, because she knew he wasn't ready to hear the truth, not while he was drowning in the lies his family created. Meanwhile, Grace guided her through gathering solid proof. They saved every message, every edited photo, and every suspicious phone record. Grace arranged for a digital expert to confirm the images were manipulated and that the messages came from a spoofing app. They collected bank statements, loan records, and signatures that proved Evan's identity had been used without his knowledge. Lena kept copies safe in multiple places, knowing the marshals would panic if they learned what she had found. Lena also began documenting her own behavior, making sure she had a timeline that showed she was nowhere near anything questionable. She saved receipts, emails, and work schedules. She wrote down every small detail she remembered from the night of the charity event. Grace told her that truth alone wasn't enough. Truth had to be organized and undeniable. As the days passed, Lena watched the marshals relax. They whispered behind Evan's back, confident they had destroyed her. Patricia even bragged to a friend over the phone, unaware that the call was later handed to Grace as evidence. Lena said nothing. She waited while they celebrated too early. Inside, she felt a shift. She wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't even angry. She was focused. She understood now that justice didn't always come with loud confrontations. Sometimes it came quietly, with careful steps and the right people beside you. And Lena was ready for the moment their entire plan collapsed in front of them. The day of the mediation arrived, and Lena felt calm for the first time in months. Grace had told her to stay composed, to act as if she simply wanted a peaceful divorce and closure. Lena followed the instructions exactly. When the marshals walked into the private room, they were confident, smug even. Patricia smiled as if she had already won. Charles nodded at his wife, certain that the evidence they had created would finally destroy Lena. Renee looked around nervously, but still carried an air of superiority. None of them suspected what was about to happen. Grace opened the meeting by explaining that Lena wanted an amicable divorce. She spoke gently but firmly, making the marshals feel secure, thinking the meeting would be simple and quick. Then suddenly she shifted. She pulled out the first piece of evidence, the photos from the charity event. She placed them on the table and explained how each image had been edited and manipulated to make innocent gestures look inappropriate. Patricia's confident smile faltered slightly, but she tried to hide it. Charles glanced at the images, confusion flashing across his face, while Renee's jaw tightened. Next came the fake messages. Grace showed how a spoofing app had been used to create texts Lena had never sent. The messages appeared real at first glance, but digital analysis proved they were fabricated. Evan leaned forward, his hands trembling. Lena stayed silent, letting the truth speak through the evidence. Grace explained the timeline, showing how the messages had been created around the time Lena was working late or attending hospital shifts, proving she could not have been cheating. Then came the bank statements and loan documents. Grace laid out the proof that Charles and Patricia had used Evan's identity to cover their debts. Evan's face drained of color as he realized he had been unknowingly carrying their financial burden. The full scale of their deception hit him like a wave. Patricia's eyes narrowed, but she opened her mouth and closed it again, unable to explain the undeniable papers. Charles began fidgeting, and Renee shifted in her chair, realizing this was spiraling beyond control. Finally, Grace played the audio recordings of Tyler Brooks admitting he had been paid to flirt with Lena and create the photos. His voice confirmed everything. The room went silent except for the recording, which repeated the truth they had tried to hide. Evan's hands went to his face as he understood the depth of manipulation. He had been tricked, used as a pawn by the people he trusted most. Patricia denied everything at first, shouting that the evidence must be false, but her words sounded weak. Charles looked panicked, breaking into small movements, trying to come up with an explanation. Renee attempted to leave the room, but Grace calmly reminded her that the authorities had already been notified. Fraud reports had been filed, and the law was now involved. Every plan they had counted on to destroy Lena had collapsed in a single moment. Lena finally spoke, her voice steady. She didn't yell, she didn't accuse. She simply confirmed that everything Grace had presented was true. She looked at Evan, whose tears reflected shock, relief, and guilt, and felt a strange mix of closure and satisfaction. The truth was no longer hidden. The marshals' lies had been exposed, and Lena was finally free from the storm they had created. The fallout from the mediation was swift and overwhelming. Charles was the first to face consequences. Authorities charged him with financial fraud, showing that he had knowingly used Evan's identity to cover personal debts. The paperwork, the loans, and the altered signatures left no room for excuses. He hired lawyers, but the evidence was too strong. Every document Lena and Grace had collected made it impossible to deny the truth. Patricia didn't escape either. She faced conspiracy charges for helping Charles manipulate the finances and orchestrate the frame-up against Lena. Her confident demeanor vanished under the weight of legal scrutiny. She tried to argue her case, claiming she only wanted to protect the family. But the law didn't see excuses. Every step she had taken to deceive Evan and Lena now worked against her, proving her role in the scheme. Renee also suffered consequences. She was subpoenaed for tampering with evidence and manipulating communications. The recordings she had made, intended to hurt Lena, were now key evidence against her. She could no longer hide behind her youth or her supposed good intentions. Every message she had edited, every private moment she had recorded, was now part of the official case, and she realized too late that she had underestimated the seriousness of her actions. Tyler Brooks, the man who had flirted with Lena at Charles's direction, faced fines and legal penalties for participating in the scheme. His casual involvement, which had seemed like an easy payday, suddenly became a legal liability. He tried to excuse himself, saying he was just following instructions, but the court didn't accept that. The small part he played helped Lena prove the larger conspiracy, and he paid the price. Meanwhile, Evan finally understood the truth. He saw how deeply he had been manipulated by his own family and how easily he had doubted Lena, the person who had always been honest and loyal. He felt guilt like a weight on his chest, realizing he had almost let lies destroy his marriage and the life they were building together. He begged Lena for forgiveness, tears in his eyes, telling her how sorry he was for believing his family instead of trusting her. But Lena didn't answer him immediately. She had been through months of heartbreak, betrayal, and manipulation. She had learned to protect herself, to stay strong even when the people she loved most turned against her. She understood now that forgiveness couldn't be rushed, and that she needed time to rebuild the emotional strength she had almost lost. She focused on herself quietly. She worked, organized her life, and made sure nothing could hurt her the way the Marshalls had tried. She didn't boast or seek revenge. She let the law handle the punishment, letting consequences fall naturally on those who had caused her pain. And through it all, she grew stronger, calmer, and more certain of her worth. She had survived the storm, and for the first time, she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice had been done. Evan came to Lena a few weeks after the legal battles ended. He looked older somehow, as if the stress and guilt had aged him overnight. He apologized deeply, over and over, for doubting her, for believing his family instead of trusting the person who had always been honest. He admitted how wrong he had been, how blind he had been to the manipulation, and how much he regretted letting lies take over their marriage. He promised he had cut all ties with Patricia, Charles, and Renee for good, refusing to let them influence his life ever again. Lena listened quietly. She felt a mix of emotions, relief that Evan had finally seen the truth, sadness that it had taken so long, and a lingering hurt for the months she had suffered because of his doubts. She appreciated his apology, but she also knew something important about herself. She could not return to a marriage where trust had been so easily broken. The pain wasn't just about what his family had done. It was about the way Evan had accepted their story so quickly without asking her, without trying to understand her side. Love alone couldn't fix that. She thanked him sincerely for the good years they had shared, for the moments when he had been kind, supportive, and loving. But she also explained, gently but firmly, that she had to move forward alone. Lena realized that walking away was not weakness. It was strength. She was choosing herself, her peace, and her future over returning to a situation that could never feel fully safe again. Soon after, Lena moved to a new city. She found an apartment that felt like hers, a fresh start where the past couldn't reach her. She focused on her work as a nurse and began volunteering in patient advocacy programs. Helping others, supporting those who couldn't speak for themselves, and sharing her knowledge became her new purpose. Every success she achieved, every life she touched, reminded her of the strength she had discovered inside herself. The Marshall family, meanwhile, continued to face the consequences of their actions. They were no longer threats to her life or happiness. Lena didn't need to punish them herself. The law had done it, and the collapse of their own schemes served as their punishment. Watching them deal with the results of their choices while she built a life free of fear and deception, was a quiet, satisfying form of justice. Lena's final revenge was not anger, not confrontation, and not retaliation. It was the calm knowledge that she had survived, that she had preserved her integrity, and that she had risen above the lies and manipulation. She walked away free, emotionally whole, and untouchable. She had faced betrayal, deception, and heartbreak, yet she emerged stronger than ever, with control over her life and her happiness firmly in her own hands. For Lena, closure wasn't about proving she was right. It was about living well. It was about moving forward with dignity, independence, and self-respect. And that, she realized, was a victory far greater than any revenge she could have taken.